What's up, everybody? My name's Pantsface, and if you're a Shadow Priest, then in front of me is the only gearing sheet you need for next phase. Now, Kiwi and Apple, if you don't know him, has for a few tiers now created a list that just compares almost every single item that the game has to offer to a BIS setup in the coming phase. He did this with phase 2 in Old War, and he just done it again in phase 3. And this sheet is even better. It has every single item and is organized so beautifully that you'll see in a little bit when I get into it. That he's just done a great job of really presenting what items are best and then also how every single item compares to those items. Now, this is the front page. If you follow the link in the video description, or if you got it from the Shadow Priest Discord, this is what it takes you to. This is just the front page. What we're looking at here is essentially the top simming DPS for a 3-minute fight for troll up top, and then for human at the bottom. So, just your horde and alliance top simming sets. So this is just the front page. We have a few tabs at the top here. So we have all alliance items, all horde items, settings, and then the changelog and to do. So you can see all the changes he's made and what he still plans to add to the sheet in the future. All right, enough of the front page. Let's get into it. So I'm going to click on the one tab that says all alliance items. Now, let's take a look at what all horde items. It's essentially the same sheet. Items scale slightly differently, whether you're horde or alliance, because alliance get that 1% extra hit and horde just have OP racials. So depending what you are, the gear is going to sim very slightly different. I think BIS setups are also slightly different. So just make sure that you're clicking on the correct one, whether you are alliance or horde. Anyway, let me zoom in a little bit here and make sure my face isn't blocking anything. Okay, that looks great. Let's take a look at the center column. So what do we have here? This is showing every wrist item, below it every foot item, feet item. I don't know why I said foot. Every waist item. And it's showing you the BIS item at top. So the item that's part of the BIS list. So this 11465 DPS number is the same thing that we saw on the front page right there. Again, I don't think my face is blocking that. And then we can also just see, let me center this a little bit more. We can also see how every item below it compares, and these are ordered from best to worst. So Bejeweled Wizard's Bracers are what we can get from tailoring, and they're 245 item level haste crit bracers. They're extremely good, and I'd recommend everybody to get them as soon as the phase starts, even if you have Grasps of Reason, which I still don't, unfortunately. But this can be an amazing item. It's an immediate upgrade for every Shadow Priest, regardless of what gear you have. And then until you get Armbands of the Ashen Saint, it's a nice holdover item just to gain an extra 13 DPS. So great item for everybody. Anyway, you can look at every item below and you see this is Grasps of Reason from Old War, which hopefully you have, but you might not if you're unlucky like me. And you can just see how every item compares, whether it's the raw DPS number, so the actual value that you get when simming that item, or the DPS delta with a nice color-coded conditional formatting. This sheet is done really well. I'm going to zoom out again, and you can just see all of the different formatting in all these different columns. I think Kiwi's done an exceptional job just not only making the information great, but also visually having it be extremely informative at a very quick glance. The one thing I do want to point out though is that not all items are created equal. So if I actually click on the name here, it'll take us to the Wowhead link. Yes, we can get redirected there. And you can see this is the item 258 Heroic Haste Spirit Spell Power. But not all items are the same stats. So Bindings of the Dark Essence is a perfect example where yes, you can redirect me. And this actually has hit on it. And that's going to be kind of a big deal because, obviously hit, you want the exact amount. You don't want to be over. You don't really want to be under. So you always want that 17%. So when an item has hit and it's replacing an item that doesn't have hit or vice versa, the set that's being used with that item is a little bit different. It's not just a one-to-one replacement of that item because the DPS would actually be a lot lower for these. So what's being changed? Usually it's going to be the wand or the offhand. There's nice options in those two slots where you don't really lose DPS or like the items are pretty strong and also the same item level. And there's options for hit and there's options for no hit. So that's a really easy slot to swap this next phase. So hopefully, as you're kind of gearing up and as you get different items, obviously your hit's going to be in flux until you do get that BIS or as close to it as you can. So hopefully you have some options to swap the hit there, but that's just something to keep in mind when looking at an item that has hit versus one that doesn't. So this is done for every slot. We have wrist, we have feet, we have waist, as I've mentioned. If we scroll to the right, we have back, neck, we have rings, we have trinkets, and then we have weapons and offhands at the bottom and also wands down below. Now, the one really cool thing for rings and trinkets is that there's 2 slots, obviously, for each of these. And so BIS ring is conductive seal and nebula band for alliance, don't forget. And then BIS trinkets, flare of the heavens and reign of the unliving. But what if you have 2 mediocre rings or 2 mediocre trinkets or just 2 crap of either? What this does actually is it sorts by, the best option. So what if you have flare and reign of the unliving on heroic or reign of the unliving on normal or the abyssal rune or scale of fates? You will see the DPS delta. But what if we go down? What if we have Eye of the Broodmother and then we have like illustration of the Dragon Soul? You can see almost every trinket combination that exists that like you could have in the game from reasonable gear, and how it compares to Abyss setup. So this sheet is incredibly informative. Now, if you look at Eye of the Broodmother, you'll see, well, where's Flare? Where's Reign of the Unliving? That's not included under Eye of the Broodmother because if you scroll up, Flare of the Heavens has Eye of the Broodmother here. Reign of the Unliving has Eye of the Broodmother. So it's essentially, if you have one of these 2 items and you want to see everything that goes with it, you can check under that item. But if you have 2 worse items and like Eye of the Broodmother is going to be your best item, then the ones that are worse than Eye of the Broodmother are essentially going to be below it. So that's just a quick, easy way where if you don't have 2 BIS trinkets, you can still see, and same with rings, you can still see how they compare to that BIS setup. Now, the one final thing to talk about is tier, which is all the way to the left. Tier is done a little bit differently. Now, this isn't compared to this BIS 11465. If you read up top, you can see tier slots use 5 set tier 9 258 and 5 set tier 9 245. Now, why is that? Because essentially, when you have one of these slots, you're always going to have your 4 tier pieces and then your 1 non-tier slot. And that 1 non-tier slot is generally, you want it to be, better than your tier option. And it's going to be an item that's probably contested because there's going to be other classes that want it. But you want to find that 1 tier slot that you don't actually want to be tier, right? You want to find the one that's better if it's like a Pharaoh's Gloves or if it's the Amis of Inconceivable Horror, which I think Warlocks used. Maybe it was Demo Warlocks. But there's always going to be one of those tier slots that you don't want to be tier. So this is just saying if you had 5-piece tier and you could pick to remove any slot, what would be the best option for you? Now, remember, our BIS DPS as Alliance is 11,465. Changing the head only gets us to 11,436. So it's definitely not the head slot. Let's scroll down a little bit. If we look at shoulders, this maxes out at 11,360. So again, not quite there. Chest is 11,355, so that's even worse. Legs is 11,343, which is even worse. And then we finally get to hands, and we can see that Pharaoh's Gloves is what matches that BIS DPS setup. So you can see the delta if you have 5-piece tier 58 and how much better essentially these are than the tier 58 gloves. And then the same thing if you have 5-piece tier 45. So just something that's really important to take a note of when you're looking at tier. But every other item is in here, and it's pretty easy to read. I'm really used to reading charts like this from work and stuff. So if you're not someone who's comfortable with it, feel free to ask, whether it's in the comments or in the Shadow Priest Discord. I'll have a link to the Discord in the video description, as well as a link to the sheet. So I can help you, someone in the Discord can help you if you have any questions and you aren't quite sure what this sheet might be saying. So feel free to ask, because everybody is here to help you. The other thing, again, if you want to look at all horde items, numbers are slightly different. You can see this caps out 11,586 instead of the 11,465. So horde get about 120 DPS over Alliance in Abyss setup this next phase. If you want to sim for yourself and you want to try to match these numbers, you can do that. Here are the settings that Kiwi actually used when simming. The important thing to remember is to use the RNG seed, because the way this works is essentially every time you sim, the value you get, your actual DPS is going to be different because it's randomizing some aspects of the fight, which is all done within that RNG seed. But if you use the same seed that he used, then you're going to get the same exact DPS numbers. Now, it does kind of depend what version of the sim you're using and whether you're using the web sim or the desktop sim. Anyway, so there might be a few discrepancies. Shouldn't be enough that really swings anything. That's really the main point here. And then we also have the changelog and to do. Let me zoom in on this. You can see all the changes that he's made, the date that he's made them, and what he's still looking to do. So not only is this sheet great, it's also just going to get even better. Now, the one final thing I do want to say, if we go back to the front page here, is that he has a PayPal link here. Kiwi is not asking for money, and he didn't ask me to say this whatsoever, but he has put a ton of work. He has put dozens and dozens of hours into this, and I know because I've talked to him about it, I've actually helped him out on a little bit of it as well. So I know the amount of effort that he's put into making sure this can be the most perfect sheet that can possibly be created by a human being. And it is incredibly useful. So if you like this sheet, if you like the work that's been done here, toss Kiwi a few dollars, a few pounds, whatever your currency is, euros, whatever it might be, as I'm sure he'd appreciate it. And I'd appreciate you appreciating him. Anyway, that's all I have to say about the sheet. If you have any questions, feel free, again, put them in the comments, ask somebody in the Discord. I think the Shadow Priest community is not only exceptional, but really passionate about this sheet because it is so informative. So again, anybody would probably be able to help you, assuming they didn't just join the Discord yesterday. But that's all for this video. My name's Pantsface, and I'll see you in the next one.